Hello and welcome to the Wealth Shepherd. My name is Ed Guanill with Guanill Wealth Management. We're going to be talking about some great topics today. And if you'd like to know more or get more information about what you hear today on the show, you can always reach out and give us a call at 916-359-2750. Again, that's 916-359-2750. And of course, you can always visit us online at www.edgwealth.com. That's like Ed Guanill, edgwealth.com. And when you're on the website, you can just go to the radio page. You can listen to some past shows and subscribe to our program on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and or Amazon Music. Today, we're going to be talking about a Kiplinger article that I found really, really interesting. The title was "These 7 Investment Behaviors Hurt Retirees the Most, but it's not too late to change your ways." And that's really, really important. So we're going to walk through some of these behaviors. We're going to try to talk about as many of them as possible. And really what makes this conversation worth having today is that these aren't really obscure technical mistakes. These are really patterns. And sometimes these patterns can feel completely reasonable in the moment, but as things change, they can add up to real costs over time. So again, we're going to talk about these topics and try to get through all of them. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jacqueline. How are you, Jacqueline?
Oh, I am fantastic, Ed. It is beautiful. It's our second podcast that we're doing together. And, I feel like we're getting so much better every single time we do this. And truthfully, you brought this topic up today and even this article, and I'm really curious about what is in it. Behaviors. I know you just talked about habits. Habits is where it all starts, right? You start somewhere small and then it creates a habit and it just sometimes can get out of hand, but in other ways, small little habits can also add up to be a good thing too. So I'm excited
Absolutely.
to get into these. What is like the first habit that we want to start with today?
Well, I think, one of the things that this article really focuses on, and it doesn't say this directly, but it really focuses on the idea of behavioral investing versus emotional investing. And so
Ooh.
some of the things that we do from a standpoint of emotion, okay?
Hmm.
And certain things will guide that emotion when it comes to investing. So the first thing I think that's really important, that is one of the behaviors that they point out in the article, is holding too much cash out of fear. It could feel safe,
Hmm.
but what happens when you hold too much cash over time? Well, your purchasing power is eroded, right?
Hmm.
When we see clients that have too much cash sitting in bank accounts and CDs and other really low interest accounts, we call that losing money safely, because
Hmm.
it feels good that you have this money there. But when you think about how inflation, uh, the cost of living, healthcare costs, these types of things that consistently go up, and we don't control these taxes, it's really eroding our purchasing power. So holding a lot of cash out of
Yeah.
fear can be really, really costly over time.
Yeah, and Ed, you brought up some really good points there. One is emotion, and I feel like that's the number one kind of red flag when it comes to investments, right? Is the emotional factor. And then the other thing that you brought up is fear. And that is also the number one, I think, emotion that drives our decisions when it comes to money. And when you retreat back and you're like out of fear, I'm just going to hold everything in my hands, you're not allowing the money to work for you. You're not allowing yourself to beat that inflation that you talked about. And, you're right. It's not doing you any good because it's in your pocket rather than doing good for you, right?
That's exactly right. And here's the reality when it comes to money. You are going to incur one of two costs when it comes to your money. You're either going to incur the employment cost, which is what it costs you to put that money to work for you,
Mhm.
or you're going to suffer the opportunity cost, which is the lost opportunity for not putting that money to work for you in the most effective way possible. And so, we went through a really long period of a very low interest rate environment. So having money in cash after the 2008 financial crisis, it gave people comfort to know that they weren't losing money anymore. But then we had this huge market increase from 2012 all the way up until 2020, and we had a little bit of volatility here and there. But that run up that people missed, that was the opportunity cost that they suffered by keeping their money in cash, because emotionally it felt safe. However, as we all know, the market had a great run, and there was a
Mhm.
lot of lost opportunity during that time period if you were holding money in cash. And, I would see people that would come into my office in 2017, 2018, and they'd say, "Oh, I've been keeping my money in cash, and now I'm ready to get back in the market." And it's like, whoa, you missed out on so much growth on that money by staying in
Mhm.
cash too long. So, identifying that opportunity costs versus the employment costs, hugely important in retirement.
Yeah. Well, and I also worry about, if you do have all the cash and you're not in the market, right? Don't you have anxiety about what you're missing out on? I mean,
Oh,
is
yeah.
that just a me thing?
No, 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 absolutely. There's always FOMO, right? Fear of missing
Yes.
out. And then
Yes.
the uncertainty of what direction do you go, where, which sectors should you be invested in, and things like that. And if you have other colleagues and, people at work, when you're talking about your 401k, you're trying to
Mhm.
collaborate that way without
Yeah.
real guidance, it's really hard, right?
Yeah,
And
and,
I think
without understanding what's happening, right?
absolutely, absolutely. That's where advisors come in to help you sort of guide you, try to keep your emotions in check so that you don't suffer large opportunity costs, and you're making sure that you're maximizing the employment costs of putting that money to work for you. Okay. And I
Mhm.
think one of the other important things that the article pointed out was how your cash reserve is often tied to specific time horizons, things that are going to
Mm.
happen here in the future. So, I always tell clients that if you have money in cash, make sure that money's earmarked for something. First, make sure you cover your 6 to 12 months of expenses. So you have that money set aside,
The emergency fund, yep.
the emergency fund. And then you have a little bit of a reserve for the just in case. What if the water heater breaks? What if
Mhm.
I have to replace the HVAC system? So you have your reserves, then you have your emergencies that something could break. And then anything after that, if it's earmarked for something specific, let's say, for example, you're going to remodel the house, or you're going to paint the house, or some major project, then it's okay to keep your money in cash. However, if you don't have that money earmarked for anything specific, you really have to take advantage of the employment cost to make sure that money is working for you. Now, it
Mhm.
was really difficult from the financial crisis up until 2020, when interest rates started to go up, because we were in such a low interest rate environment that there was really nowhere to put cash that could really help you. Bond
Mhm.
rates were really low, bank CDs were really low. So you were sort of forced into choosing some sort of a strategic portfolio. And if you were too emotional about that, that would prevent you from actually taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yes. Yes, and I completely understand that, right? I mean, again, we talked about fear of missing out. We talked about, really the timing of the market. And I feel like that kind of leads us into what? Point number 2 here. What is point number 2, or the second behavior that we should look out for?
Yeah, selling after a market decline, right?
Mm.
Sometimes it feels, again, it kind of ties back to the emotions of it all. But the
Mhm.
article points out that oftentimes, if you sell after a decline, now what you're doing is trying to time the market,
Mhm.
and you're breaking the golden rule of investing, which is buy low and sell high. And
Mhm.
so when you start to chase returns, timing the market is extremely difficult. I don't know anybody who has success timing the market. You often hear about, this analyst or that analyst, how they've predicted, right? Quote unquote, predicted the market. But really what they're doing is forecasting.
Mhm.
And when you're forecasting sort of market adjustments, then you have a better opportunity to understand when the market goes down for some period of time. Riding through some of those downturns is going to be much more profitable than trying to sell at the bottom to get out and then re-entering at the top. And that's what's happened. That's sort of what happened with those cycles from the people who lost money in 2007, 8, 9. They finally sold when the market hit its rock bottom, which at
Mhm.
that point you might as well have just stayed in,
Mhm.
right? And watch the big rebound. And then they were trying to re-enter the market at the top of the market. And so,
Mhm.
we have a saying that successful investing is about time in the market, not timing the market.
Okay. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because, Ed, I think that that's a big, worry or I guess behavior that a lot of people do out of that fear, out of that emotion. And, so what do we do about it? How do we prevent that?
Yeah. So again, one of the most important things you could do is have a written plan.
Mhm.
One of the items that they point out here is a consistent review of your written investment policy with your advisor, or making sure that you don't want to review this every day. I have some clients, they're retired, they watch the news cycles, it
Mhm.
increases the emotional impact of their decisions. But you definitely want to make sure that you're having a consistent review schedule of your written plan. And if you don't have a plan, it's important that you put one together. And whether you work with an advisor or you do it yourself, we were all taught in high school, right, that if you write it down, it's a commitment, right? If you write something down in your schedule on your calendar, that's a commitment.
Mhm.
And having a written plan is important. The One of the most important things about that written plan is, we always tell our clients that retirement is not linear. Things are going to change. And sometimes those changes can be things like life changes, right? The loss of a family member, the loss of a spouse, kids get married, you have
Mhm.
to maybe take care of an elder parent.
Life
Uh,
happens.
Life
Mhm.
happens, right? And so having a written plan allows you to see and forecast where some of the adjustments might be able to be made, whether
Mhm.
that's in your spending. Maybe you're going to start drawing income from one of your accounts. So
Mhm.
having that written plan, it does a few different things for you. One is it gives you a roadmap. It gives you some guidance on how to approach retirement. And then it allows you to see where you can make adjustments as things change in retirement.
Yeah. And within that written plan, we have a term in kind of the finance world, and it's called diversification. And Ed, can you maybe explain that for our listeners what that is and why we do it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people understand diversification in the sense that if I own a bunch of stuff, I'm diversified. I don't have all my eggs in one basket.
Mhm.
And yes, that's true. But sometimes your diversification also comes down to income diversification. So when we look at
Mm.
diversification from a portfolio standpoint, we're looking at how we position the assets, right? It goes back to the asset allocation, if you will. How are you
Mhm.
allocated? You have certain domestic stocks, you have some international stocks, maybe you have some technology sector ETFs. So you're diversifying your portfolio. Then you move into that income phase where you have income diversification. So
Mhm.
again, it goes back to sort of the written plan, making sure that you have that plan and outlining what we like to call the sequence of distributions, which is basically on our retirement roadmap. We show our clients how and when they're going to start drawing from each one of their accounts. Let's say they have a IRA, or they have a 401k, they have a Roth IRA, they have a trust account, and maybe they
Mhm.
have inherited accounts. So, when is the most tax efficient way to start drawing from those accounts? And also, the diversification goes back to our previous point. As life events change, right? As things happen, you may have to make adjustments in that income diversification. So, when we talk about diversification, not only are we talking about the asset allocation and how we diversify our investments, but we're also talking about how we diversify our income to make sure that we have the most tax
Mhm.
efficient income distributions possible.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up taxes because I think that that is something that people tend to forget, right? I mean, that is a foundational piece in your retirement plan. And, you really have to account for that in all of your other behaviors, right? Because it can be really costly.
I think taxes are probably more important than just
Mhm.
about any other part of our investment strategy these days,
Mhm.
because not all retirement dollars are taxed the same. We have
Mhm.
different accounts that are taxed differently. And one of the more important aspects of retirement is the three major risks to retirement are taxes, inflation, and rising healthcare costs.
Mm.
And two of them we cannot control at all, but taxes we can control to some degree, right? We can't
Mhm.
control if we pay taxes, but we can control when we pay taxes. And so when we pay taxes is as important as if we pay taxes, right? None
Mhm.
of us are getting out of here alive, Jacqueline. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. And two things are certain. It's going to be death and taxes. We're
Yes.
definitely going to pay our taxes. right? But if we could control when we pay those taxes, we might be able to save. And so
Hmm.
one of the things that I like to tell people is you can make more money saving on taxes than
Hmm.
you can by making more money.
And
And
having a strategy with taxes. Mhm.
100%. And what we mean by that is, every dollar we earn, we have to pay taxes on. Yet, if we
Mhm.
could save a dollar on taxes, that's one more dollar back in our pocket. So the idea is as you go through and you build your diversification, you've diversified your assets and investments, you've now diversified your income. You also want to diversify your tax strategy, making
Mhm.
sure that you're not overpaying taxes, taking advantage of opportunities. And I think, one of the biggest opportunities we've had in a long time was when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed in 2017. That gave us a specific timeline to work within where taxes were reduced. And now
Mhm.
it's been extended to 2030. So it's supposed to go from 2017 to 2026. And then, potentially the tax rates would go back up. Now it's been extended till 2030. So we've got this great opportunity for our clients to help them really diversify their income and diversify their tax strategy to help them save as much taxes as possible over the next few years.
Well, I love the sounds of that because I don't want Uncle Sam knocking at my door every day. I would prefer maybe once in, a blue moon. But I appreciate that, Ed. And that
Yeah.
kind of reminds me onto a next point is we talk a lot about fear, and I think what goes hand in hand with fear is risk level. And,
Yes.
and how it's so different for each retirement strategy with each plan that you put in place with your clients. So, what kind of behaviors come along with different risk levels?
Well, one of the most important topics we talk about with our clients when we do educational workshops or we meet with them one on one is understanding your risk tolerance and
Mhm.
why that's important. And the reason that's important is because our risk tolerance is really a sliding scale. And what I mean by that is, when the market is fundamentally working really well, you have low inflation, low unemployment, high profits, good earnings. The market's sort of just pumping along and it just feels easy, right? It feels like the
Mhm.
market is just easy returns to come by. So we tend to be a little bit more aggressive because of that emotional piece, the FOMO. I don't want
Mhm.
to miss out on these big returns. So I'm a little more aggressive here now. And as markets start to adjust, you start to see high inflation, higher unemployment. Maybe the business fundamentals are getting a little shaky. We have a lot of uncertainty in interest rates, taxes are going up. Now we're sliding back down that scale, saying, whoa, wait a second. I don't want to be way out here on the risk level because I don't want to lose my money. And so the
Mhm.
emotional part of the investing comes into play. So one of the things that we like to encourage our clients to do is periodically update your risk tolerance.
Mhm.
We have a system that we use called the Color of Money Risk Analysis, and it's on our website. If you go to the website, click the resources tab, and you hit COMRA, it's called Cobra, Color of Money Risk Analysis. You can update your risk tolerance for free on our website. And we encourage our clients to do that every, year to year and a half, make sure that we're staying in line with our investments
Mhm.
alongside their risk tolerance. Because as things change, right? I think emotionally, as we get older, we want less risk. It just
Mhm.
sort of kind of goes hand in hand with aging. But sometimes when we look at portfolio allocations, the allocations are still too far out on the risk level. So when you talk about risk and reviewing your plan, not only do you want to review your allocations, your income, your tax strategy, your risk tolerance is important too. You want to make sure that your risk tolerance is in line with your investments today, not 10
Mhm.
years ago.
Yeah. Well, and we just talked about it earlier. I mean, are you somebody that watches the markets and stresses and fears every day? Are you somebody that leaves it alone and trusts the, process and the timing? I will say I'm on the younger side, so my risk tolerance is going to be very different than someone 5 years from retirement, right, Ed? I mean, even our risk levels between the two of us are going to be completely different.
Sure, sure. We're all looking at different time horizons. And one of the topics that the article points out is, how your time horizon impacts your risk tolerance and how it also impacts your overall investment strategy. And so the important thing is the consistent review. One of the things that
Mm-hmm.
we do with our clients is we do quarterly reviews. I try to encourage my clients, don't watch the news cycles. Don't make decisions based on what you're hearing today on, whichever news channel you might be watching. Let's look at our plan. Let's make sure that we review that plan on a quarterly basis. And let's just make sure we stay on track. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we want to make sure we're not doing is just doing things from an emotional standpoint, because that can be really hectic. It can get very confusing at times, and it can make people feel really, really uncertain about their retirement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Ed, we are running out of time in this episode. Why don't we kind of do a quick summary for our listeners and, any other things that you want to add before we, share the contact information and close out today?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. The important thing is, if you're holding too much cash, revisit that.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And we've got some good opportunities still. Treasury bonds yields are still pretty good. Savings rates at the banks are still pretty good. I've seen some pretty good CD rates. So
Mm-hmm.
there's still opportunity to put that cash to work. Don't incur the opportunity costs at the expense of the employment costs. Make sure your money's working as best you can. Make sure that you're reviewing your plan periodically, making adjustments along the way. Update that risk tolerance and make sure that you have a consistent review process. And then again, diversify, not just your investments, diversify your income, diversify your tax strategy, and just make sure things are in line so that you could have the retirement that you dreamed of without stress.
Yeah, and I think that this episode, there's a lot of common themes here that we talked about. A lot of emotion, fear, allocation, diversification, and truly just readjusting as you go and continue that relationship with a trusted financial advisor like yourself, Ed. And so I know that you offer a complimentary consultation to to the listeners. So why don't you share your contact information to see how they can reach out for that?
Yeah, absolutely. We love sitting down with people and just giving them a second opinion of what they're doing and just giving them a little bit more insight. You can always reach us by just giving us a call here at the office, 916-359-2750. Again, 916-359-2750. Or you could go to the website. The website is www.edgwealth.com. That's Ed G as in Ed Guanill, edgwealth.com. And right in the center of the page, there's a link to our calendar. It just says schedule a complimentary consultation, and that'll get you right to our calendar. You can pick a time that works best for you, and we'd be happy to sit down and share some thoughts and ideas with you.
Well, thank you, Ed. And what a great episode. I mean, now I'm rethinking my whole strategy here and where my risk tolerance is. But great information. And I'm so glad that we talked about it. So that does it for this episode of The Wealth Shepherd with our host, Ed Guanill.